the main event from that night. Terence Crawford, Israil Madrimov. Terence Crawford, it goes the distance. Terence Crawford wins by decision, and he officially becomes WBA super welterweight world title holder. My apologies on that part. Before I break down the fight, though, must I give some credit to Terence Bud Crawford. He is now 41-0 over his career, 31 KOs. He is a 2-weight undisputed world champion. He is a 3-weight Ring Magazine champion, and he is a 4-weight world champion. This is one of the greatest fighters we've seen. He is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He is one of one. This era, he's one of the greatest of this era. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's an all-time great. That being said, this past weekend was a very interesting fight. And I want to go and break this down because there's a lot of different opinions on this fight, right? First of all, I want to say this. We look back, and I look back through some of the fight parts, and the broadcast team did not give Bud a lot of credit for the hits he was giving. The far more powerful hits was certainly provided by Bud Crawford in that fight. And when you rewatch it, I think Bud certainly definitely won the fight. I had no doubt about whether or not he won at the time, but I think he won it by a lot more than even maybe people thought right out the gate. But what I really want to get down into is there's a lot of debate whether or not A, Bud really won the fight, and C, by how much, and was this too much of a weight jump for him? And I want to address those two things. So, first of all, in regards to that, yes, Bud won the fight. He put on a masterclass. It was a great performance overall. No, didn't get the KO. Yes, the 11-fight KO streak came to conclusion. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he can't fight at this weight class. In fact, I think after watching that, Madrimov is a guy that I think was really, really overlooked going into this fight. I think a lot of people did not have the respect that he deserved. And we see now that I think he just might be the most elite 154 guy outside of Bud Crawford. Now, there's Jerome Boots Ennis. That's the guy I would like to honestly see him fight next. But I think Bud is just fine at 154. What I would like to say is this, though. We know the big rumor at hand right now. And everything, including what Turkey came out and said the other day, was, okay, we want Canelo next. Canelo's the fight to make. Canelo's what we want. Canelo's what we want to see. This, that, and the third. That was what we've been hearing, and Turkey made that very clear. If he won, that was going to happen. If he lost, Virgil Ortiz was most likely going to be the fight that was then going to merge and occur when everything went down and was said and stated. Well, we won the fight, so it doesn't mean that the offer now is on the table for Canelo versus Bud Crawford. And to that, I say, if that is the fight, and that's genuinely what the fight is that Bud wants, who are we to say he doesn't deserve that fight? I just listed his resume. He deserves whatever Bud Crawford really wants. If Bud Crawford wants to go fight Canelo and move up multiple weight classes again to then go fight Canelo, let him do it. At the end of the day, yes, there could be a severe beating in that. Of course, it's boxing. Anything can go down. So obviously, that's always a risk. But in terms of a legacy standpoint, nobody's going to really, if he loses that fight, nobody's going to look at that fight and say, he's not good. He's just, he's going to have a legitimate excuse where people are going to look and say, okay, he was fighting up so much weight. There's weight classes for a reason. It is what it is. So it doesn't have that much to lose from that standpoint. From a health standpoint, obviously, there could be things that you could lose there. But what I like to honestly see when I saw from that fight was, there's got to be a little bit that people look at and say, okay, well, maybe there was a little bit of weight jump. Was the weight jump just a little bit too much, too early, or whatnot? Doesn't he maybe need to settle down 154 for a little bit? And like I said, it's up to Bud. He has the right to do whatever he wants. And of course, I still would watch Bud versus Canelo. That would be an enticing fight. But almost from my standpoint, I almost would say, I wouldn't mind seeing Bud do a fight at 154 one more time at least. And if he can go out there and dominate then okay, we know he's good and he's good to go. And I think that actually would be what happens because we look at some of the other guys. Virgil Ortiz is a potential candidate to fight next. And you could have a rematch that could potentially happen. And you also have an option to go fight Jerome Boots Ennis. Those are three guys around that weight class that you could then go and say, okay, Bud, you fight this now, and we will do Canelo, mid-time next year, and you fight one of those other three, maybe December this year, maybe January, whatever the case may be of next year. And I think that honestly is what I would prefer to see happen. I wouldn't mind at all seeing him go fight Canelo, as I said. But if Bud decides to go forth and fight one of these guys and do one more at 154, just kind of get his legs underneath him, see if he still got it, see if that truly is something he can be dominant at. And if he goes out there and runs through somebody, then we know the answer is straightforward. Let him go fight Canelo. He's ready for it. But I think just getting one more fight underneath his legs at 154 wouldn't be a bad idea whatsoever. And then the other option for him to fight is Canelo. So Bud Crawford, he is spectacular. I just listed off his resume. He is one of a kind. And speaking of Canelo, there was a side note that we saw today that his trainer / manager came out and he talked about saying that they're also targeting a potential fight for Canelo to occur in December in Japan if he beats Edgar Berlanga on September 14th, which, fighting Japan, and that's not what Turkey suggested saying the next fight for Bud was going to be. And I did catch that point because Turkey said it's going to either be at Legion Stadium in Las Vegas, we said the biggest stadium in Las Vegas, that would be that one, or it's going to be in Saudi. So that obviously is not going to be in Japan. So I almost feel like the cards could be kind of getting set where we end up seeing Bud versus Canelo next year if all goes as planned, but we'll see what is happening there. However, at the very same time, I want to make sure that I give major respect and props to the winner of that fight, or the loser of that fight, in Israil Madrimov. If he didn't earn your respect that night, I don't know how that's possible. I think he had to earn the people's respect. He took on Bud Crawford, who was debatably the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and he took him 12 rounds. He ended his 11-fight KO streak, and we see the footage now coming out of the results post-fight, and he took a pretty good beating that fight. We'll be 100% honest, right? He took a good beating that fight. And I think that goes to show his character. That goes to show what he's made of. He is not going to go down. Guys from that area of the world, we've seen that historically. Triple G is the guy that we can look back to. Their chins are made of steel. They don't fall. They don't go down. And the beating he took looked like he probably should have been knocked down 1 or 2 times, but he obviously didn't. He took him the distance, and it was a much more competitive fight than anybody had expected, I think, heading into that night. So in regards to him, I think that if Bud stays at 154, well, it might be unfortunate to do a rematch. How's he going to get those belts? However, if Bud does move up and he's on the back end of his career, Israil Madrimov still has a bright future, many, many more years ahead of him. Madrimov has a chance will be a champion once again at some weight class. He is going to be a great fight. And I alluded to a couple minutes ago. Honestly, seeing him versus Boots would be a more appealing fight. I would not mind that at all. I would actually like to see that fight and see who comes out of that fight. I think that would reveal a lot of things as well. But Israil Madrimov should have earned everybody's respect. He is legit. He is an incredible fighter. He had a good game plan. I think he blew the first few rounds of the fight. And had he won those and gone out of the gate fighting like he did the later rounds, it could have been a different story maybe. I think Bud was going to win regardless. But that could have potentially happened. So like I said, I just want to give major props to Israil Madrimov. Incredible overall fight. It was a very, very technically sound, good fight. There is one thing I do want to say, and I mentioned this on the Thursday show. What Turkey's done for boxing is sensational. I'm not going to even judge or say anything about what he wants to do. Whatever he wants to do, he can do. He's changing the entire sport. He's making these mega cards. I think we can all admit, though, that maybe, just maybe, that the transition periods in between the fights was a little bit too long. And, even for the main event, the concert and all that was special, and I'm honestly not against that aspect. And the walkouts were unique and special. And for a mega fight of that caliber, I get it. But you had all the car giveaway, and that's a whole nother story. But the car giveaway aspect, the awards, all things that probably could have been done earlier in the night, could have been done, another time. But it is what it is. Like I said, I'm not going to be too critical of it. At the end of the day, we got one of the best boxing cards, if not the best boxing card in U.S. history. There's no way I'm going to sit up here and complain about what happened that night overall. I just think that maybe we could transition to make it smooth, kind of go flow a little bit better. Second co-main event fight. This, you could possibly say, could have been the upset of the year. We're going into a fight where I'm genuinely shocked. I, of course, said that Pitbull Cruz was going to win that fight, and I thought it was going to be done in a few rounds. Nobody saw that one happening. Rayo went out there and put on an absolute clinic. We know what Pitbull is going to do. Pitbull will be on the attack. He's going to be pushing forward the vast majority, if not the entire fight. He's going for the big hits. He's going for the kill over and over and over again. He doesn't back down. He keeps attacking you. That's a tough style to fight for a lot of guys. And, we've seen him lose. Tank beat him. We know that. But he doesn't really go down hard. So you've got to be technically sound and outsmart him in a way that most others have not been able to do. And we saw Rayo go out there, and he ends up becoming the WBA super lightweight world title holder now. He stole that entire belt away from Pitbull Cruz. And that fight was quite clear. And if I'm going to be honest with you guys, I don't think that was even disputable. That was a fight that Rayo went out there and he earned that win. He earned that belt and he put on a show. And I think he woke a lot of people up as well. I think when we look at how technically sound he was that fight, Pitbull landed a couple hits on him, but Rayo was in complete domination for the vast majority of that fight. It wasn't, not only did he dominate, but this was an upset. He was a clear-cut underdog. And he went out there, he looked like the champion throughout the entire fight. Pitbull just could not find his rhythm, could not get going. And, I know Pitbull obviously thought he won. The crowd thought so. But when you look back at the film, it really wasn't that disputable. And I think we look at this now, and we add another massive player into the super lightweight title champ and into the division now. Rayo was a guy we all looked at. He was a good fighter, but, there was certainly a gap between maybe him and the other top echelons of that weight class. And as of now, it's like, okay, well, we have another player now. We've got a guy that has a legitimate chance to make some noise in this weight class. And he's another big time player. He's now holding a belt, and that means we can see another big fight. I'm excited for that because I think he is an excellent fighter. He is a very technically sound. He's a very good fighter, and he showed that he could persevere throughout 12 rounds of Pitbull Cruz. And there's not going to be a guy that's going to chase you more so than Pitbull. You could say on the attack, Tank is better because Tank is obviously he has much better footwork than Pitbull does. He's got a lot more power than Pitbull possesses, and Tank's more technically sound than Pitbull. However, just being on the pressure that over and over for 12 rounds is not an easy task to do. And for him to handle it as well as he did, he earned a lot of respect that night. Then we go to the next fight with the big boys. Andy Ruiz, Jarrell Miller. It was scored a majority draw. Was not a fan of that call at all. Jarrell Miller won that fight, in my opinion. Here's what I'll say, though. Jarrell Miller won the fight, but I felt there was more that Jarrell Miller could have done. I felt like I could just see that there was a little bit more tank gas left in that tank that he could have pushed through and made a statement. There was a lot of rounds early on where Ruiz was in clear control over Big Baby, but then when Jarrell Miller flipped the switch, he was on the complete control. But yet there was times where I was like, is this a round that he made it be lost? Even though you felt like he was in control and winning it, but he just didn't do it. It was a very weird fight to have how it occurred in some of those rounds. It was very hard to score some of those rounds. And so, am I mad with the majority draw? No, but I do think Jarrell Miller won that fight. Then we see after the fight that Andy Ruiz ended up breaking his hand, so he's going to need surgery recovery. He's going to be out for a little while. But when he does return, I would not be opposed to seeing a rematch. I was surprised Andy Ruiz, you could see he got gassed out early, but he still did put up a good fight. He still had a good performance overall. And Jarrell Miller did look a lot better than he did back in December 23rd in the Riyadh fight in Saudi Arabia. So, is that a fight I wouldn't mind seeing again? Absolutely not. They could run it back into a rematch, but it's not something I would per se say I want to have happen. I think both guys could go in their own direction. Both guys were okay. We can still do it. We can compete, and let's go find the next best fight for ourselves. Here's a topic I do want to get into, though, that I've got some thoughts on. This is the fourth fight of the main card, and that is Moran Bakole versus Jared Anderson. I'm going to call it the media as a whole in this one, and that does include myself. I thought Jared Anderson was going to win that fight. I thought he was going to win that quite clearly. Yeah, I could not have been more wrong there. And, what I started thinking was, okay, well, let me break down this fight first of all. We saw the highlights. Moran Bakole knocks him down in round one. Jared Anderson, we saw he's got grit. He's got that grit of a fighter in him. He did not back down. He kept coming at him. And, he lasts a few more rounds, and then round 5, it's over with. But major props from really staying in it. Moran Bakole was spectacular in that fight. He was absolutely sensational. It was an incredible fight. He did an incredible job. He made a statement. But here's what I want to say about Jared Anderson. I think that when we talk about USA heavyweight boxing, and USA boxing as a whole, let's be honest, there's been a drop off from where it once was, and this is specifically in the heavyweight division. And there's countless reasons we could discuss as to why this occurs, but there is this massive gap and hole right now where we're trying to fill this void. It was once upon a time where the great heavyweights fighters were all from America. You might have an occasional guy here and there from other nations and countries, but we had the greats were right here in our nation. And, it slowly disintegrated, and yet we had an era then of Deontay Wilder, and where Wilder went out and he was one of the premier faces of boxing in general. He was a massive draw. He was spectacular. He was a champion, and so he held down the fort all by himself. And we were all saying, okay, it's fine. We got Wilder. It's not a big deal. It is what it is. Well, folks, bearing some miracle, as much as I love Deontay Wilder, my favorite fighter, the guy got me loving the sport of boxing, his career is probably done. In terms of at least being a top level contender and fighter, he should be over with. And so I think the American media almost overstated this aspect, saying, well, shoot, we know Wilder's not the case, and a couple of these other guys are older. And so who do we have to possibly place in this position of the spotlight of heavyweight fighting in America? Well, we have this young up-and-comer. He's 24 years old, Jared Anderson. He looks real good. He's got a bright future. He's 24. Yeah, he's still almost a kid in a sense, because remember, the brain doesn't fully develop until you are 25 years old. You're not fully considered an adult by overall doctrine until you're 25 years old. That's when the brain actually fully is grown into yourself. So he's still not even at that point. He's still developing, growing as a man, as a person. He does not have a man body yet. He's not fully developed and grown in that aspect yet. And yet we said, okay, he's skilled, he's good in all these aspects. Well, he must be ready. And so people started ranking him inside the top 10 because he is American. He's a heavyweight. And well, what else do we have? Well, we saw what happened then. And he was the favorite heading into that fight. And yet we go in there and immediately we see the difference why boxing is not a sport in which you play. You play basketball, you play football, you play soccer, you play golf, you play these sports. You don't play boxing. You fight. That is what it is. It is a grown man sport. And especially as you move up the weight classes, it becomes more and more so a grown man sport. You don't have a lot of guys in the 20s even really contending or competing for the most part. It's the guys in the 30s and late 30s. Look at the champions. They're in the 35 plus, right? That's your prime for heavyweight boxers. And we looked at Jared Anderson and thought he could buck the system and be different. And at the same time, I think we looked at it and said, well, Jared Anderson, well, let's think back. Who was our last American great heavyweight? Oh, yeah, Deontay Wilder. Very similarly, Deontay Wilder was always the skinniest, thinnest, lightest, smallest fighter in the ring. Now, he was very tall, obviously, that aspect, sure. But we can't forget why he was able to be in that ring. Wilder could have weight cut and gone down to cruiserweight, maybe even light heavyweight. I doubt that. But he obviously could have gone down a weight class. But he was heavyweight, and there was one reason for that. No, debatably, I believe so. We have not seen a man on this earth that has been recorded with as powerful, as dominant, and as lethal of a weapon as a fist, as a hand, than Deontay Wilder's hand was. That was a separating factor. That is why Deontay Wilder could go into fights and dominate and disintegrate guys the way he did, even though he was so much smaller than every guy he fought size-wise. And so I think a lot of us in America, self-included, thought, well, we just had Deontay Wilder. Let's just throw him out there. He's got it. And obviously, he skipped the system. A lot of guys will go in a certain trajectory and, work their ways up to this type of magnitude of a fight that Jared Anderson took part in this weekend. And, Turkey gets involved and there's lots of money involved. And he takes this big opportunity, and you wouldn't want to pass that down. But he is 24 years old. And we saw the difference between a grown man in his prime versus a 24-year-old kid, basically. And, Martin Bakole made a statement, but it was not a pleasant and it was not a good fight overall. It was entertaining, sure, but I really want to say this about Jared Anderson, though. I don't want people to stand here now and just wipe him off the table and say he's over with. Is he a contender right now? Absolutely not. But he's 24 years old. Now, hopefully, we have to make sure, and obviously I hope that everything mentally is okay with him. Obviously, this is probably going to be a fight he's going to have to recover for a little bit. Those were some hard hits he took. He obviously got some damage in that fight. Let's just to put it lightly. It's going to be a little bit of time until we see him back in the ring. It could be late this year, maybe I'd say probably early next year we see him most likely. But I don't want people to wipe him off and think he's just not relevant right now. He is 24 years old. There's not many guys at 24 that we see fighting at this magnitude stage at the heavyweight division. And so I still think he's going to be very, very good. Give him 3-4 years until we let his body fully develop and grow. And I think we can have one of the premier fighters. He's all we got in America, if we're going to be honest. There's not another guy that we have in American heavyweight boxing that we can look at and say, this guy's got it. He's what we got. He's the best we have for at this point in time. And so I still think two young heavyweight boxers. I love Jared Anderson, Moses Toma. Those are the two guys that are really leading the future. And so I think we've got to be patient. He took a step up way too soon in this fight. But don't write him off yet. He is 24 years old. He's got plenty of time to reinsert himself into the elite company of other great fighters. He's going to be back in the heavyweight division eventually. He's got skill. We saw the talent and skill. He's got toughness. He's got grit to him. He's going to be able to be all right. It's just he's not ready right now. He's not ready to go fight those type of big boys at this point in time. But he's going to be all right. So don't write Jared Anderson off yet. He's got a bright future. It's way too early, just too big of a step up right now. He's going to be all right. Just let him develop over the next couple of years. Now, we got to talk about Martin Bakole, though. Martin Bakole walked into this fight as a guy that people consider, he's obviously a top 20 echelons heavyweight fighter. No one really put him in that top group and in that top contending group per se, but he's right there on the cusp of that top contending group. And we didn't know he was the underdog heading into this fight. He made a statement. He sat there and took Jared Anderson's punches as if nothing was happening to him. And then his punches, how else do you put it than saying they were dominant, they were destructive on Jared Anderson time and time again. And so when we look at Martin Bakole, he's officially arrived. Let that not be twisted right now. We have a new big time player in the heavyweight division. He is a guy that's going to be a threat. I've said this a couple of times. The heavyweight division is tied up now for the next year or so. We're not going to have many belts opening up. Okay. But there's a lot of big fights to make in the heavyweight division. It is stacked overall right now. And so I look at it and say, well, this guy's arrived. I want to see him next. He didn't take any damage at all, I don't think, in that fight. He can easily fight again in the next couple of months. We could see him back out there, and I think everybody wants to see him after that performance. And names that came to my mind, obviously, like I said, he's not getting age. He's not getting one of those guys yet. But Zhilei Zhang, I think that's the guy we could see. It could be a very rough fight, let's be honest there. Both are guys that are just going to sit there and wait for the big heavy hitter. It could be interesting, could not. Joe Joyce versus Zhang was a very interesting fight. And so we could obviously see those two have a good fight, but that's one fight I have on the table. Jarrell Miller, I just said Andy Ruiz, you could do the rematch there. Not sure if that is what it is. Not a bad rematch, but not something I prefer. But Jarrell Miller should be healthy right now. I could see those two fight. I would like to see that actually. Maybe even Hrgovic. I personally was not very impressed with him in his last fight. There was so much talk about him being this next dominant dude. And, Daniel Dubois just put in work on him. It was a brutal, quick in and out fight for Daniel Dubois. And so I think that Bakole maybe works there, but those are kind of three fights I have circled for him. But don't get it twisted. Martin Bakole, he has arrived and he is legit. So that's what I'm excited for. And going back to this other topic, I briefly touched up on it, but I said I do want to come back to it. And that is in regards to U.S. heavyweight division. In terms of all fighters, yeah, we have work to improve on in the American boxing ranks, but we still have a lot of good guys in other weight classes. But the primarily emphasis right now is on the heavyweight division. And, I said Jared Anderson, he's good. He's going to be fine in the future, but we got to wait some time. And so nobody's really coming out that is fully equipped and ready for a big stage at this point in time, bearing a last miracle of Deontay Wilder. And Jared should not be rushing another top fight. He needs to go back and work his way back up. Fight a guy. I could see something like Otto Wallin or someone like that. Guys. Wallin just came off a win recently, but obviously Wallin got pieced up by AJ Rowe pretty badly in the December 23rd fight. So you could see a fight like that, but just working his way back up. That's what Jared Anderson needs to do. And so what I have to ask then is, well, what are we going to do with the USA heavyweight division? That is our premier division. Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, George Foreman, Lennox Lewis. The list goes on. We have owned the heavyweight division since the beginning of time for the most part. That is no longer the case to any extent. We're not first. We're not second. We're not third. We don't have anybody ranked in that top echelon so that deserves to be in that top echelon of guys. So what I have to ask now is, okay, what is going on in the U.S. heavyweight division right now? And there's a lot of things. One aspect is well, is it that we have so many other guys that are fighting that could be heavyweight fighters doing other sports. I think that probably is the primary thing. We talk about a lot of guys in the basketball world that there's so much money involved in basketball, the fame, everything. It's I don't want to say easy money, but you don't have to work your way up as you do in boxing. It's not as damaging on your body. It makes more sense to go down basketball. And why would you not? It's a much easier opportunity to get into basketball more from the time you're young and so on and so forth. That I think a lot of guys are just getting embraced into basketball. You could say our country overall has become a lot more softer from top to bottom in terms of people. That is certainly something you could throw in there as well. I do think primarily though, you look at some football guys, but we're talking about heavyweights per se that can move around. There's some guys that you look at that are heavyweight caliber guys that play basketball that could certainly be interesting to see what they could do in the boxing ring. And I think that's where a lot of guys are going. But we're going to have to figure something out because right now it is not looking good for American heavyweight future. Jared Anderson is really all we got. There's nobody that we saw in the up-and-coming Olympics right now. We don't have many guys that's working their way up. We have a lot of older guys that's moving on now. And so that's got to be addressed ASAP if you are the United States. We have to figure out what's going wrong and how we're going to build up these next great heavyweight fighters in America. Now, a couple other fights I do want to talk about. David Morrell, he got the win, and he is the WBA regular light heavyweight belt, and he's now positioned himself to become the mandatory challenger for the Artur Beterbiev versus Dmitry Bivol winner. I don't know exactly where he falls in this list. I would say I put David Morrell just below those two, and if we're going to have Benavidez in that group now, he's third. I said Morrell's fourth. But a good win. Decent. The gap, though, in that division, that weight class is special, but we have one of the most hyped up fights we could ever ask for, and maybe boxing history in regards to, two guys, the same weight class. Nobody's moving up or down weight class to make this fight work. It's not a catch weight. It is two guys, natural bodies, fighting in their weight class that just happen to be two of the elite fighters of the world in Beterbiev versus Bivol. That comes up in a couple months. That's going to be one of the biggest fights ever. And those two guys are so dominant, that's hard to imagine them really losing to anybody else. Now, with Benavidez going into the group, that's obviously enticing. I want to see him fight the loser or the winner of the Bivol Beterbiev fight. But David Morrell has certainly positioned himself, and he's put himself now possibly too, because Beterbiev and Bivol, they're going to fight their fight in the end of the year. And likely there's going to be a rematch, which will happen, probably March-ish of next year, I'd say, March, April maybe. And so you're waiting a little bit. And so what I'd like to see is, can we get Benavidez versus David Morrell? And therefore, you officially know exactly who's going to be the fighter of the winner of the Beterbiev Bivol match. So that's what I like to see. But the other last fight I want to touch upon from this weekend, Andy Cruz, he stopped Moran in round 7. Tough. He had a tough little battle there. But once again, gets another KO, gets another stoppage. And, he's got a bright future. There's a lot of fights we can look at for him now. What's next? He's still young. He's got to develop. We're already hyping up the Olympic rematch from 2021 with Keyshawn Davis. That could have happened. But like I said last time on Thursday, that's not a fight that should happen yet. That's a fight of two guys that could be at the top of the weight class one day at one point in time. Let them build themselves up to have that mega fight then. It has a chance to be so much bigger than it would be right now. So let that just kind of continue to grow. Let Andy Cruz and let Keyshawn Davis develop themselves and continue to win their fights and rise up the ranking set. The fullness of what could be that mega fight in the future unfolds in, maybe 2, 3, 4 years from now. So that's the breakdown of the Riyadh season card in LA.